of your testimony that to combat poverty, one of the most effective approaches is to promote economic growth. Is that correct?
That's right.
I think that's certainly a concept that we could all agree with. But I believe you also stated that you can promote economic growth by cutting either personal or corporate taxes. Is that right?
I think that's right. I think when you have higher rates, that it discourages risk-taking, and yes.
Now, there's no evidence, though, to support this notion that cutting taxes for high-income earners actually promotes economic growth. Isn't that right?
I don't believe that is right. I think the literature is pretty complicated on the topic.
Okay, but in 1993, President Clinton raised the marginal income tax rate for high-income earners, I believe, to 39.6%, correct?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, and during the 8 years of the Clinton presidency, the economy created 20.3 million jobs, correct?
Yes, that's right. There's certainly, it's not the case that there's any one thing that, that affects economic growth.
Okay, understood. But with a higher tax rate on wealthy Americans during that period, it's fair to say we had tremendous economic growth, right?
We do. We don't know what it would have been in the absence of the tax cut, but that's right.
Well, that's interesting because when President George W. Bush took office, he cut the tax rate from 39.6% in his first year to, I believe, 35%, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And during the 8 years of the Bush presidency, the economy lost approximately 650,000 jobs, correct?
Well, sure. And we had the biggest downturn since the Great Depression, which was a result of a big financial crisis.
Right. So I'm just not clear that there's any evidence to support that notion that lowering tax rates actually in some ways promotes economic growth. Mr. Haskins, you testified, I believe also that promoting economic growth was an important way to deal with sort of combating poverty and income inequality, correct?
Yes.
And I assume you're familiar with the economic concept, marginal propensity to consume?
Mm-hmm.
And if I understand this correctly, the marginal propensity to consume relates to whether individuals in certain income groups are more likely to spend any increase in income that they receive. Is that right?
Correct.
Now, low and middle income individuals have a higher marginal propensity to consume when compared to high income earners. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so that means, I guess, that low and middle income Americans are more likely to spend any additional increase in income that they receive, correct?
Yes, but less likely to invest it.
Okay. So if you raise the minimum wage, currently there's a proposal to raise it to $10.10 per hour. Is it fair to say that these low-income individuals are more likely to spend the additional increase that they receive as a result of the minimum wage being hiked?
Yes.
Okay. Now, we've got a problem in our economy today that relates to consumer demand and the fact that it's not as robust as it otherwise should be in a thriving economy. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
So if you raise the minimum wage, we've established that these individuals, lower income individuals in America, are more likely to spend that money. If they spend that money, that's going to result in an increase in consumer demand, correct?
Yep.
If you increase consumer demand, the economy grows, correct?
Not necessarily, because you're not taking account of what happens with employers when you raise wages. They may hire fewer people, so the economy might not grow.
And is there evidence?
If you increase the minimum wage $1 or $1.50 something, I think the research shows it'd be a very modest impact. But if you raise it as much as we're talking about now, I think it's not completely clear, but it could well have an impact. You'd have fewer jobs, and you would not get the effects that you're describing accurately here.
Right. Okay. Well, I think we haven't seen necessarily, though, statistically, that raises in the minimum wage in the past have necessarily resulted in any dramatic cut in employment. But let me move on because my time is limited. In terms of this productivity gap, Mr. Greenstein, I have a chart that I'd like you to just quickly reflect upon. One of the problems, it seems, in America, as this chart illustrates, is that between 1973 and 2001, productivity of the American worker has increased dramatically, I believe, upwards of 80%. But median wages for that same worker has remained largely stagnant. Is that a problem that perhaps is contributing to the income inequality that we have in America?
Oh, there's no question that it is. I mean, we've had a lot of discussion in this hearing about the term inequality. So maybe we could talk about having the benefits from economic growth more broadly shared. In the 50s, 60s, early 70s, the benefits from growth were more evenly shared, and increases in productivity were matched by increases in wages. And then that connection seemed to break. There's all kinds of complicated factors involved here, but I do think that this is a problem, and I do think it's one of the reasons why an increase in the minimum wage is a good idea. I do think the evidence suggests that the 1010 level is in line with levels like in the late 60s. I use the same inflation adjuster that CBO and a lot of statistical agencies do, and it would tell you that the peak minimum wage before would be $9.86 in 2016 dollars, which is when, under the proposal, it would go to 1010, so it's in the same range.
Gentleman's
If
time
you asked me
expired.
about raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, I'd be nervous about the disemployment effects.
Gentleman's time
But
has
at 10,
expired.
I think it's solid.
Gentleman from Texas, Mr. Williams, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, my question will be directed to you, Mr. Winship, but first I want to make a statement. I'm a small business owner in Texas, family business, 73 years. I've been in business 44 years. We employ about 100 people.